It's 9:02, so I figure we might as well go ahead and start. I'd like to start off by, first of all, just saying I'm so glad to welcome you all here, and I'm so glad you decided to join our workshop today, which is entitled Prison Ministry and Restorative Justice, Hearing the Stories. I'm Marilyn Schneider. I chair our conference's Prison Ministry and Restorative Justice team. And we're going to begin today with one of our team members, Reverend John Krimmel, who will give us an introduction. And then we'll have three speakers who will be sharing their stories. Before we start, let me just ask if everyone would be able to mute themselves, because sometimes you have the dog barking in the background or the TV in an adjacent room or whatever, and that might distract people. So if everyone who's not speaking could mute themselves, and then the speakers can unmute as they need to do that, that would be great. Let me just say a word about John Krimmel. He's an associate professor of criminology at the College of New Jersey and holds a PhD in criminal justice. He's also a licensed local pastor with a 2-point charge at Neshaminy and Penns Park churches. So I'd like to turn this over to John at that point and let him begin.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Marilyn, for all your work on this project and your fastidious editing and support and nurturing of all of us. Thank you, Marilyn. Let us take a moment to pray. Please bow. Father in heaven, thank you for this day. Thank you for this gathering, and thank you for this opportunity to come together in your name. We recognize there is so much work to do with prison ministries and restorative justice. We pray today that something somehow touches everybody here at this gathering, to give those interested a spark of spirituality for those who so desperately need us. Warm our hearts today, Father, to your ministries and prison ministries, and let us be missionaries of your need. Be with us as we seek real change and be interrupters of evil. In God's name we pray. Amen. So our first slide, if you hit that, Marilyn, please. Okay. And there's a lot here, so I don't have to apologize for that, but just take a minute to absorb what I'm saying here. So we know, science knows, and common sense tells us that a prison stint for a person or a family member is particularly disruptive to the life cycle and, of course, to the spiritual cycle of people. But we know that caring interventions can save lives, and caring interventions can disrupt this destructive cycle of crime and incarceration. Next slide. And we may not think about deep spiritual lessons on a weekly or a daily basis, but prison ministries can offer us options as to learning these spiritual skills of forgiveness and restoration and prayer. And actually very practical lessons about how to listen, and lessons of patience and commitment of time and other skills. Thank you, Marilyn. Next slide. This is something that I learned as a professor of prison life. I'll give you a minute to read that. It seems to be conventional wisdom that so many inmates recidivate. So it's almost like, oh my, we're such a failing system that so many inmates return to prison. But 40% don't. So I teach my students, let's think about the 40% that don't recidivate. So what is it that separates those ones that continue to be in this cycle of prison in and out and those who don't? And really, those 40% don't want to return to prison and they seek change and they really want to avoid any further contact with the criminal justice system. So with our glass half full, well, we as ministers or missionaries in this endeavor should know that over a third of people coming out of prison really want to change and really want help and really do not want to go back into prison. Next slide, please. And I'll read Matthew 25. I was in prison and you visited me. So God wants us to be part of the solution. So for thousands of years, he's wanted us to be part of the solution and to come alongside people who are so desperately in need of our intervention. Next slide, please. And in Hebrews 13, remember those who are in prison as though you are in prison with them. So coming alongside of people touched by the prison industry do wonders for changing people. And there's really nothing like sharing the gospel to people who will listen and teaching and praying for people with broken hearts. And I haven't been in prison, so I imagine in my deepest thinking and empathy about this, that it is a absolutely heartbreaking event for those in prison and those touched by it. And we're going to hear more about that later. Next slide, next slide, please. So I know I'm going to sound a little like a salesman today, but prison ministries can give you spiritual rewards for sure. And this is a huge need for our church and churches and members. Next slide, please. And these, of course, are vital and ministries of compassion. Imagine if you're in prison and you know that there's a Sunday school class meeting and praying for you once a week or maybe more. And this could be really the first times for so many people that ever experienced genuine love for anyone. Of course, they may have confusion about what love is, but it's an opportunity for people to understand and learn about Christian love and the value of Christian love. Next slide, please. Churches that have prison ministries, their worship changes, where people of all color meet to express their love for Christ and joy. Things happen in churches. And inmates definitely see themselves, here's the change, as God's chosen people, not God's frozen people. Next slide, please. And we talked about this before our program started this morning. There really is something to do for everybody. And prison ministry gets the church members off the pews and outside the church walls. We're going to come back to this concept in a few minutes. Next slide, please. There's all a place for us to serve. We can serve in church, like in the Sunday school. We can serve places that are far from us, places that are close to us. And we can learn just how close these institutions are if we consider that. Next slide, please. And working in prison, as we talked about the scriptures, it is doing God's work. It promotes cooperation and goodwill. And it's really a good, if your church, our churches are doing this, we're really good role models for all denominations, and people from all socioeconomic backgrounds and different theological points of view. All of us know it's doing God's work. Next slide, please. Next slide, I'm sorry. And working with inmates, oops. I think you go back one, please. Yeah.
I'm working on that.
Yeah.
There.
I think okay. And, I was drawn to ministry as a layperson and as a local pastor because of the joy and enthusiasm that being a pastor brings to me personally. And this is, prison ministries are working with the criminal justice system. It brings a great deal of enthusiasm and joy to your life. And this spreads in a local church. So Christians that and other members of a congregation who are active in teaching and counseling and witnessing and prayer gain the respect and spread that desire to other members that they come in contact with. Next slide, please. Okay, Marilyn. And here's a list that I just want you to take a minute to look at. And this could be a basis of a longer conversation, but we talked about this as well before we started. Supplying meals to families who are taking care of children whose parents are incarcerated, are offering ministry to victims, or for goodness sakes to the correctional staff, and supporting youth reentry programs and teaching others and coming together and praying for victims of criminals and youth that are engaged or pulled into gun violence, and or we could become advocates for needed change and prevention. Next slide, Marilyn. And then this is also a lot to absorb in just a few minutes, but part of prison ministries is this restorative justice. And without cutting this off too short, our criminal justice system has become so reliant on punishment as a resolve, because punishment is actually easy when you think about it. The decisions are quick. It's and it doesn't require any creativity to punish people. They've been doing it for thousands of years. But restorative justice gets us to think about ways in which to navigate the criminal justice system, maybe without punishing, and restorative, returning the situation back to the way it was before a law or an offense was happened. And this takes the punishment and the side effects of punishment off the table. So this is more than a buzzword. It's really about pre-incarceration programs. It's about intervention programs. It's about diverting people away from the criminal justice system, and really about carefully considering how we can keep young people away from the dangers of being punished, especially at an institution. So my 15 minutes are up, and I think we have. I'll be available here. I'll be the whole time for questions, and there was one more slide here, I think. Yes. Now I want to target speakers, and I'll mute myself.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction, John. We're now going to have our three speakers sharing each of their stories. And I'd like to ask that as you develop questions, if you could type them into the chat so you don't forget about them, or write a note to yourself if you'd like. But if you type them into the chat, we'll have them there, because we're going to not take questions at the end of each speaker. We're going to let each of the three speakers speak. And then at the end of those three presentations, we will have the rest of the time will be available for questions, either that have been brought up in the chat that I'll bring up, or if you have additional questions at that point, or if some of the questions generate more questions. Okay, and as you type them into the chat, I'd ask you to address them to everyone, or else to myself, Marilyn Schneider. Please don't address them to the speaker, because I won't be able to see those. So please address them to everybody or to Marilyn Schneider. Either of those would work. And then, yeah, so we'll look forward to having questions after the fact. Now, as far as our speakers, we're going to begin with Jean-Fatih Musin Bridges, who goes by Musin. He is a former capital case inmate, now a returned citizen, a father of 5, and a grandfather to soon-to-be 7 grandchildren, who is here to share his experiences in solitary confinement and life after prison. He has quite an intriguing story.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about my life story and journey. I guess you can say I'm like a walking, living, breathing restorative justice. And I can say that because I know the criminal justice side and I know the restorative justice side. So being, from an urban neighborhood, and of course, like the majority of most people from the urban neighborhood, growing up with a single mother, but please don't misunderstand me. That's not no excuse. That's just a known fact. Because still, like, you still gotta make choices. As growing up with a single mother, I already had a preconceived notion of being a protector, and that's what brought me on this life journey, I guess. Always being there for my mother and coming up, doing what I can for her. Like, I never wanted for nothing. She did the best she could. She had her stints of drug use and stuff like that, but I still never wanted for nothing. And she brought me up. I made it through life. I'm still here. But being where we come from, that allows us to make the different choices of, are we gonna go do bad things or are we gonna do good things? And I walked the line, fine line. I always had a job, so I didn't, but at the same time, I always in the criminal lifestyle as well. And at 18, I was living at my house with my girlfriend at the time, and 2 guys robbed her at gunpoint. I wasn't there. So at that time, of course, again, the urban neighborhood, you don't call the cops, you don't do stuff like that. You handle things on your own, and that's what I did. I went to confront them, and 2 people were killed. Now, that being said, 18 years old, sitting in a jail cell, contemplating what's going to happen with my life. And at that time, I already had 5 kids, and they was all small. So not only did I just leave the street, not knowing where my life going to go, I left 5 kids there as well. I guess how you say, recycling the single mother thing in the urban neighborhood. Again, not an excuse, but a known fact. But that put me on a life journey that put me in position to, try to turn my life around. But then I guess that time, 18 years old, sitting in a prison cell, you're not really ready yet. So as life went on, I got convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to death. And I was shipped to, my first prison would be Camp Hill. And as sitting in Camp Hill, I was able to, still start contemplating what my life is going to be like sitting on death row. And many people really don't know, you get dates to die on death row, even though you got many appeals left. But now imagine you sitting in solitary confinement and somebody tells you, well, okay, you have a date. Which means I have a date. You have a date to die. So prepare yourself and be ready. How do you tell an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old this type of question? Or where do you want your body shipped? And again, you got to realize you're sitting in solitary confinement. And sitting in solitary confinement, as everybody really knows, just imagine yourself sitting in a little bit bigger bathroom where your toilet's there, your TV's there, they feed you there, and you can't go nowhere. And if you do go somewhere, you go to a shower, but you go in handcuffs, escorted by 2 officers. That was my life for 20 years. But as time went on, I decided to, gather my faith. And at 1998, that's when I embraced Islam. And from that day forward, things took a turn for the better. Of course, I still was sitting inside the confinement and still was fighting the death penalty and still didn't know what my future held. But the stress went away. The every day not wanting what's going on went away. I didn't worry about that any longer. I let faith take control of what's going to happen in my life. Don't misunderstand me. I still fought and I still practice law and found a way. So here comes year 21, and I got a blessing. And the blessing was they granted me a new trial and said, but I still sat on death row for another 3 years after I got granted a new trial. I guess they said, I guess faith was like, well, we're not ready just to let you go just yet, but just prepare yourself. And that's what I did. And over the years of reading books and learning how to, think more, make better decisions, I was preparing myself. And like most people say, you sit in a cell and by yourself, it's not a good thing. If you're not mentally strong to do that, you're not going to survive. You're really not. But I can say about one thing about being on death row, even if you didn't really like each other, you stuck together. You were there for each other. You talked to each other. And when one wasn't feeling right, you spoke to him and tried to get him back on the right track. And that really, really works. But then comes year 22, and I finally get my new trial affirmed and was placed in population, and which was a whole new world. Because just imagine going from sitting in your cell for 20 years by yourself to going in population where there's 900 people walking around you. That is an experience that is real interesting. So this allowed me to really get involved in different type of programs and workshops that better prepared you for when you're released. And like I think I was telling Marilyn earlier, and I think I was telling John, that most people don't want to come back to prison. That they are ready to do better things. They just don't have the tools to do it with. And those on the outside don't realize that those same people that they locked away for many, many years, whether it be in solitary confinement, whether it be in prison itself, are going to be returning citizens. And they wonder why, when they return to citizens, they revert back to what they're doing because they weren't given those tools. And not many people are proactive in gathering those tools. So in solitary confinement, you try to, better yourself the best you can. But the only thing you're doing is reading a book. We all can read books, but not everybody's book smart to take those same tools and apply them to your life. But with John said, printed ministries, different religious factions allows you to get yourself right and allows you to, better prepare yourself for seeing a free world. So I involved myself in restorative justice workshops, we call it Let's Circle Up, and became a facilitator. Another thing called AVP, Alternative Violent Project, became a facilitator. Because if you're not being proactive with the problem, you're part of the problem. Because they're saying these same people are going to be turning citizens. So you just got to prepare yourself to do right and not be so prideful, not to ask for help when you need it. At the same time, we can also help. And there's many ways to help. I mean, it's not just prison ministries or stuff like that. There's literally programs that allow somebody to help someone when they step outside that door and not let them just wither in the wind. Because a lot of people that come home don't have no IDs, don't have no health insurance, no nothing. And with me, with my story is that, a lot of people are, prejudge, but a lot of people are not defined by their last mistake. And they are prepared and ready to do good, given the opportunity. But if they're not given the opportunity, how are they going to do good or show you that they're ready to do good? So I say, continue to ask questions. That's another thing. A lot of people don't ask questions. They see it. They wonder why it's going on, but don't ask the proper questions to see what they can do to resolve the issues itself. And prison is full of people that are smart. I mean, I had a guy named Felix. We grew up together. He came to jail first. He came to jail with a life sentence. I came to jail with a death penalty. This guy started 3 different programs. He signed at least thousands and thousands of certificates for guys going in front of parole boards. He just recently went up for commutation and they denied him. Not because he do right. You know what they said? He's antisocial. Can you please explain to me how you be antisocial when you literally develop 3 different programs of workshops that will allow people to better prepare themselves to see the free world? So, but that just shows you how negatively people see things instead of seeing them positively and helping those that are trying to do better. Because you can't expect somebody to do better if they don't have the proper help to do better. And again, solitary confinement does not help you do better. That isolates you from others. So when you do go to the free world, if you do be blessed to make it to the free world, you don't know how to react to people around you. They see, as I've been told and read about, they said solitary confinement started back with the Quakers. And it stated that they developed solitary confinement so people can get in touch with their higher power, being alone by themselves, to get in touch with their higher power. But over the years, I was Christian at one time, even though I embrace Islam now, but I'm Christian at one time. And I never seen no religion that you dealt with things alone. There's always a group. What they call it, circles. You sat down and you prayed. You sat down with others. You talked about it, not by yourself, but with others. So I'm here to say that we continue that sit down with others. Even when it comes to religious fractions, we all need to get together. We all need to look at this in a light that these returning citizens are coming home to us. Let's embrace them, not shine them. I'm not shine, but shun them. Because if you shun them, they're going to revert back to what they know. And that's what? Committing crimes. Because no logical person, and anybody here, nobody in this group right now is going to go hungry. Nobody in this group right now is going to allow their family to go hungry or be destitute or anything like that. They're going to try to do anything they can for their family. But why would they have to if this circle and a group of people will come together and help? See, so to stop the solitary confinement and stop the isolation of those returning citizens is what we need to do. And like I said, I'm a, how you say, anomaly, so to speak, because I've been blessed. And I'm the first person to tell you I've been blessed, and I'm scared not to continue doing what I'm doing. I'm scared not to pray. I'm scared not to try to do the best I can as a man out here with 5 sons that are grown now, with grandkids that are small. I'm scared because giving a blessing and then throwing it back in its face like, nah, I don't care. I'm out here now. I'm gonna do what I want to do. It's foolish. And if anybody here thinks that people want to come to jail because they just want the easy, fast money, no, because if they had a proper job or a proper source of income that's just logical, that they can take care of themselves, I promise you, they would not be preconceived to come back. And I got a little more time, but to tell my story is to show others what could be. Because as you sit here and you talk to me, if she wouldn't have told you who I was, you would really wouldn't have known that I was on death row for 20 years, that I was locked up for 23 years. You would have never known that even though I was locked up for those many years, when I came home, you know my first job was? I was a facilitator and counselor at a drug and alcohol treatment center. I never used drugs or alcohol in my life. You would never know at this present time, I work at a courthouse, in the clerk court's office, where we do gun background checks, when we do prints, fingerprint processing, where we do stamping for appeals. And those same guys that I was with call me to ask me, can you look up this? Can you look up that? I've been set in a position that can help others. You wouldn't know that I'm part owner with business partners of a trucking company that hauls cars. And I've been out 1 year and 3 months. So I'm here to show you that given opportunity, people will take full advantage of that opportunity. and that will be and will gladly show you that they're here. And when it comes to kids, we got to give them options, because they're only here or seeing what they see in the news or seeing on the corners. But they have options of, and I'm talking about early on options, not when they get teenagers, they can learn to do a trade or this and like that. No, I'm talking about early on. Catch them early. If you catch them early, then they're going to have a opportunity to do good. But if we wait until they're 17, where they're already dug into whatever life they're into, they're not going to want to change who they are, because they're dug in already. Even though somebody around them show them the good, they don't really care about that. And I said, I thank you for the opportunity to really talk and show you that we are ready. Those of return sins are ready. And I can tell you that right now, at least 10 guys that were with me on death row are home, or in the next month or two is going to be home. And they all got years like me. And we're here and we're ready to help and make sure that not only that people don't return, we'll make sure that they put an ending to solitary confinement, making sure that they stop the recidivism that continues to happen out here. Because like I said, if we're not being part of the solution, we're definitely being part of the problem. And that comes from all walks of life. Don't matter race, religion, age, we're all here because we're all citizens of this country, right? So we can't say, well, that had nothing to do with me. It definitely does. And again, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Hey, well, thank you, Muhsin. Really appreciate being able to hear your story and your willingness to share that. We're going to move on now to our second speaker, who will be Valerie Langston. Valerie is a retired teacher who serves on our team and who taught in many poverty-stricken schools in Philadelphia. She worked to assist students who got into trouble with the law and still travels all over the state to visit those who remain incarcerated. She's going to share a number of issues that we need to be aware of. So Valerie, go for it. You want to unmute yourself?
Yeah.
There you go.
Good morning, everyone. And I want to thank you for giving me the time to do this. As a teacher, I've seen a lot of problems start in the schools, and they bring it from home into the school. And as Sean Neef said before, that being sometime a single parent, some of the issues at home are a single parent, gang pressure. A lot of times the kids get gang pressure in the neighborhood and they do what they see. And also the climate of not telling on anyone. So that starts and comes to the school. Then when they're in school, the labeling of children of color into special ed classes or into behavioral classes, because a child may be restless in the classroom or not used to sitting in the classroom. So then they fall behind in reading and math, and ergo they get labeled in special ed. Then when they get in trouble, I've been in the high school for a long time. I saw it start in the elementary school. I was there for maybe about 6 years. Then I went to the middle school and then into the high school. So I saw the process of the kids getting in trouble in school. Then when they get in trouble in school, in the neighborhood, and get in trouble with the law, then the parent doesn't have the money to get a lawyer. And sometimes that, what do you call the lawyer that you don't have to pay for? Whatever, the lawyer that you don't have to pay for.
Public defender.
Yeah.
The public defender. Lots of times a public defender is not invested in the case. So he's just picked up the case and one time the parent was late in calling me to the trial. I got into the courtroom the last day of the trial, and all of a sudden everybody was running toward me in the courtroom and I couldn't understand what was going on. But what happened was I started screaming because I saw that my student was being railroaded in the courtroom, and the judge stopped the court at that time and put me in his room to calm me down. But even still, the child got railroaded into being in prison for life. And I'm still having nightmares about that because the prosecutor was very nasty to me. But that was my first time dealing with a court case. So I've learned through my students that if you don't have money, a lot of times you're in a lot of trouble. Then there's this plea deal, and they try to get you to take a plea deal. But I learned through the students that you don't want to take a plea deal because that's an admission to guilt, that you do want to have your time in court to say what you want to say, but if you don't have the money, you can't get there. So a lot of times they end up with the public defender. Then visiting the prison, here's where I get into a hard time. Now, if you're in Philadelphia, you're sent to prison all the way across the state to maybe Erie, Pennsylvania, or Pittsburgh. And if you're from Erie or Pittsburgh, you're sent all the way across the state over here to Philadelphia. So that means the family has to get together and get the money to get on the prison bus. Well, I refuse to get on the prison bus because it says prison bus, so I'm going to drive my car. So which means I drive 5 hours or 6 hours to get over to Erie or get over to Pittsburgh. There's a couple of prisons outside of Pittsburgh. I drove 5 hours one time to visit the prison and couldn't get in because I had an underwire bra on. So they don't tell you some of the things that you have to wear. You have to be careful what you have on. Then once you get into the visitor's room, as I said, there's a procedure going through security, which is nerve-wracking to say the least. And, just to get into that prison room is not comfortable. And the other thing that bothers me is that there's counseling for the family, but if you don't tell the family where the counseling is, then they don't know to get it, because I'm constantly calling to try to get counseling for the children that are left behind, because I have 2 girls in prison and the rest of them are boys, males in prison. So they've left children behind, which I feel needs a lot of counseling and support. Then the ones that are fighting their case, they're asking you to send a letter of recommendation that you would help support them when they come out. Well, I have no problem with that. So I feel, as I've told the parents, I said, as long as you stay in touch with me, not that I'm the most wonderful person in the world, but it looks good if you stay in touch with a teacher or something, so it looks good on your record. So I try to take the phone calls. I try to send money. This is really making me get more technology savvy, because then I have to go on the Department of Justice website and learn how to put money on their case, on their account. So it really is, it's a lot when you're trying to support somebody in prison. You have a lot to learn, a lot to do, and you have to be patient. But the one thing that bothers me is this air of not telling on anybody, because I believe a couple of my students are in prison because they're not going to snitch on anybody. And to me, that I don't understand that, but I understand that that could be detrimental to their health to tell on somebody. So I get that, but it just makes things hard for the person. So it depends on your case whether you can, where you can live and what you can do. Because if it's a sex crime, you have to register wherever you go. And getting ID is very important, and it's hard for a lot of people because we think it's nothing to get ID because we got ID when we were in high school, driver's ed. So it makes things very hard. So I'm still writing letters. I'm still visiting. Well, I'm not visiting now, but I'm still writing letters and accepting phone calls. So it just they need a lot of support. Thank you for my time. I'm finished, Marilyn.
Super, Valerie. Thank you so much for sharing. You've been involved in a lot of different aspects on the outside, and we appreciate hearing those perspectives. Because a lot of this we just don't know, until you get, and as you said, once you get involved in it, you start discovering all these problems that people run into.
One thing I wanted to say is that there is a thing called books to prison, where they used to send books to people. If you write to them, the prisoner has to write to them, and then you can get books sent to you. But I don't feel that that's working now because of the COVID thing.
Yeah, a number of things have gotten handicapped because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We have to figure out ways to be creative. Well, thank you. Our last presentation will be focusing on restorative justice. And this is going to happen in two parts. We're going to start off with a very short YouTube video by Danielle Sered. Danielle runs a restorative justice diversionary program in New York City entitled Common Justice, and has written a wonderful book called Until We Reckon: Violence, Mass Incarceration, and a Road to Repair. And so what I'm going to do is see if I can share my screen and show that video. And then afterwards, I'll introduce Linda Van Til to talk a little bit more about her experience with restorative justice. So hopefully we can get this to work. There we go.
We talk a lot about violence in this country, but we rarely actually talk about how to solve it. At Common Justice, we believe all solutions to violence should adhere to 4 core principles. They should be survivor-centered, accountability-based, safety-driven, and racially equitable. Responses to violence should be survivor-centered. We pretend now that we do responses to violence in survivors' names, but rarely do we listen to them, and rarely do we do anything that actually delivers them safety. At Common Justice, we give survivors who've experienced crimes like assault, robbery, even attempted murder, the opportunity to decide whether they want to see the person who hurt them incarcerated or see them in a program. 90% choose to see them in Common Justice. That's not actually because they're merciful. It's not usually because they're forgiving. It's because they're pragmatic. At the end of the day, as survivors, there are 2 things we can't stand. We cannot stand the thought of going through what we went through again, and we cannot stand the thought of anyone else going through what we went through. So when we're given a choice, we choose the thing that we believe will avoid those 2 outcomes. The hardest people in the world to persuade that incarceration will keep them safe are people who live in neighborhoods where incarceration is common. They have paid the price of prison's total failure with their enduring pain. Responses to violence should be accountability-based. Now, we use the word accountability a lot in our country, but we usually use it to mean punishment, and they aren't the same thing. Punishment is passive. Punishment is something someone does to me. All I have to do to be punished is not escape it. Accountability is different. Accountability requires my action and my involvement. It requires that I acknowledge what I did, that I acknowledge its impact, that I express genuine remorse, that I make things as right as possible, ideally in a way defined by those I hurt, and that I do the incredibly hard labor of becoming someone who will never cause that harm ever again. It's not punishment that gets us to safety, it's accountability. Responses to violence should be safety driven. We talk about prison as though its function is to produce safety, but the evidence suggests that it does the opposite. In fact, it's criminogenic, which means it's likely not just to fail to decrease violence, but to increase it. That's not a surprise for those of us who are in the business of reducing violence. The 4 core drivers of violence are shame, isolation, exposure to violence, and an inability to meet one's economic needs. The 4 core features of prison: shame, isolation, exposure to violence, and an inability to meet one's economic needs. That means we have baked into our core responses to violence exactly the things that generate it. Until we develop responses that do the opposite, we will never become safe in the way we deserve. Our responses to violence should be racially equitable. They have never been racially equitable in this country. First, our responses to people who cause harm are rife with racial disparities at every single point in the criminal justice system process. But equally, we have not treated all survivors equitably. It means that survivors of color on the whole are less likely to be met with the things they need when they've been hurt, less likely to be centered in our stories and understanding of who survivors are and what they want, and less likely to have their desires honored in the legislation that would otherwise be passed in their names. Similarly, the fundamental producers of violence in our culture are not just about individual characteristics. They're systemic and structural. So if we really want to be a nation where violence is uncommon, we will have to eliminate the racial inequities that currently exist in things like schooling, in income, in access to healthcare and mental health care, and in all of the fundamental social services that will make or break the well-being of a community. We have to stop pretending that violence is a problem that we cannot solve. We can and will solve it when we develop solutions that are survivor-centered, accountability-based, safety-driven, and racially equitable. For more resources on those solutions, visit us at commonjustice.org and subscribe to this channel.
Okay. Oops, hold on. There, I don't think we needed to hear about cabbage recipes. Okay, well, that was just a little intro from Danielle Serret. I'd like to now introduce Linda Van Til. Linda is a certified lay minister who serves on our team. She is a trained mediator for victim offender reconciliation programs, where she's had considerable experience working with youth. She's also a trained healing communities facilitator and has led several of those workshops. She's also involved in a whole lot of other roles in our conference. So odds are you've seen her in one place or another, because she gets around and does an awful lot of things. But I'd like to turn this over to Linda and let her share her experience.
Thank you, Marilyn, and good morning to all of you. I see some familiar faces and some that I have not met, so we're glad to see you. Technology is wonderful. I don't know how you all survived, and I can only imagine what it's been like for those that have been incarcerated, that have really been cut off from society, more so than they were before. Secretary Wetzel, in one of the meetings that I went to with some of the other programs I worked with, said to us as people of faith, the majority of people that are in our prison system are going to return to your communities. How do you want them to return? Do you want to be involved with them now and help them return in a better way by supporting them? Or do you want them to come back and return back and do more harm in your communities? I was involved in many different aspects of prison ministry before I went into restorative justice programs. And the program that Sean talked about has similar and the same principles for restorative justice programs I've worked with, but it's facilitated a little different. because of being in prison and the type of program they're working with. Two of the programs that I worked with in our county, and I know other counties in the conference have similar programs. I'm not sure what they're called where you live. The one program I worked with is now called ADVOS. It started out over 25 years ago. Whoop. As Lancaster Victim Offender Reconciliation Program. Then we went to Center for Community Peacemaking, and then our Mediation Center and our Restorative Justice Program merged, and now we're called ADVOS. So if you've heard any of those terms, it's all the same program. The Mediation Center mediated more community disputes that came up. Our program worked with the parole system, and both programs I worked with youth under 18 years of age. They could have aged over 18, but their crime was committed when they were under 18 or under. Most of the crimes that we worked with did not include drug and alcohol, or I should say they were specific level crimes. I know there are also some groups in different counties who work with groups that have been in drug and alcohol and some higher level crimes. We did not. That was just a choice that was made in our system. We were given cases from the parole system, and then we sat down with, after over 50 hours of training, and each year we had to attend continuing education programs. And it was for a good reason. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing for a conference. You sit down with the offender first if they agree to do that. Most of our cases did not have a choice. It was part of their probation that they had to sit down and do a conference, or at least start a conference. Not all cases that we were given went to conferences, but I did see in the cases that I had, even if we didn't go to a conference because the victim just did not want to at that point, and sometimes there was a year and a half till we received our case and were able to start working on it. And people just wanted to move on at that point. But I did see the good that came out of what happened. A lot of changes happened in the time I worked with that program over 10 years. We at least were able to get offenders to write letters to their victims, and parole asked them to do that. But when we did it as a volunteer organization, it seemed to have more impact because it wasn't something that they were mandated to do. We strongly recommended it as part of what they were to do. And even through that, I saw healing, and most of the cases I had were stolen cell phones, computers, fighting. And some of the families knew each other that these cases affected. And to see that healing take place and tears come to a family's eyes by getting this letter from this child who harmed their family, I can't even put into words. It just gives me goosebumps now. So there's so much we can do to help people not recidivate and go back into the system. We tried very hard in our county not put youth into the system because we saw once they were in the system, it was very difficult for them to get out of the system. It was even with strong family support. Some of the other cases that were heard while I was part of that program, there was a man from Guatemala who would come to the United States and purchase buses to take back to their country to help people that lived in rural areas get to their jobs in cities closer to where they worked, and they didn't have transportation. So he would come and buy these old school buses that school districts no longer use. He was waiting to transport one of these buses one summer, and the bus all of a sudden was set on fire. As the case moved on, it turned out it was 3 boys, just not being malicious, just playing with matches. The bus started on fire. They didn't know what to do. They went through the program. They did come to a conference, and the boys were very remorseful for what they did because they never intended to do what happened. The man from Guatemala said he was glad to see the remorse on these children's faces and knew it was genuine. And he also was glad to see that he wasn't targeted because he was from another country. With some of the cases I had with the other program I'm going to talk about a little bit, I saw the victim become the offender of the offender that he was the victim of in one of the cases. The other program I worked with was our youth aid panel, which is run by our district attorney's office now. It wasn't when it was started over 20 years ago, and I helped start in our school district. These youth are not in the system yet. They are their first-time offenders, and they have to be, again, a specific level of offense to even be recommended. And they're recommended by our police departments in our school district. The district attorney's office took over the program because there were some districts, school districts, police departments that wanted to run the program a little bit different than what the program is. So they kind of streamlined it and put it under that level so that they could have all of the same programming, have it run the same way. But basically, we were given cases, again, school fights, cell phones, computers stolen, lower level offenses. We had 3 to 4 community members on a panel. Our school district had 3 different panels, so we rotated once every 3 weeks if cases came in. We listened to the youth story, and then we listened to the parents. And after we listened to both sides, we decided, it was called a covenant, I think, where we decided on what the offense was, how we could get the youth to see the harm in the offense, and not just assign them just something to do. Sometimes they were given community service. I had a case where there were several youth that decided they were going to get into where cell tower was, and something happened while they were there and the tower went down. So we tried to get them to understand, what if your parents or you needed someone in the emergency sector and they didn't have service, so they couldn't get to you, and they couldn't get to you and something happened, you would die. So we tried to match up with the best we could the cases we had and how to get the youth to understand the level of their offense. If they worked through their covenants, their cases were expunged. But again, it was a one-time deal. If they reoffended, they could not go through our program again as on the youth aid panel. I could probably talk more. Marilyn did tell you some of the other things. When I started out in prison ministry many, many years ago, from nudging from God, nobody then that I knew was in prison. My son has multiple mental health issues, and through his behavioral issues ended up in prison. I have been fortunate, I guess I can say fortunate, that I've been able to visit several prisons since Secretary Wetzel has taken over, and I've seen how he's trying to clean up our system. Many programs that were once in place for people with mental illness and homeless are now ending up in prison, and the prisons were never set up for those programs. They're trying to work to the best of their ability to help people that are in those positions and keep everyone safe. And it's a big job. I did a lot of advocacy work, working with legislation, but I came back to this because I really felt like this is a way I can connect. Both programs I was with, we had to send statistical information to our court system to show how much we were saving the county with dollars, but also how it was impacting individuals, not just the families, but the victims. And it was just constantly reinforced to us, do not re-victimize the victims. The other case I talked about where it was a school fight, and I'll just say between a nerd and a jock. The jock bullied the nerd, and neither one wanted to go into a conference setting. I knew both these families, one family better than the other, and the mother later called me when then her son, the nerd, victimizing the offender who had victimized him. And I tried to explain to her, this is why sitting down in a conference and being able to talk to each other and understand these conferences didn't just happen. There were a lot of hours of preparation with both parties before we went in, and it was agreed to what the setting was going to be. I guess that's pretty much it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Linda. Thank you for sharing. And just thanks again to each of our speakers. We have some time now between now and a little bit before 10:30 to go through some questions. And some questions have appeared in the chat, and we can start with those. But I'd like to encourage you to think of whatever questions you may have. It's a wonderful opportunity to address those, because this is one of the aspects of these trainings that I find most worthwhile, because people will come with questions. And if you're willing to share those questions, you can sometimes get an answer that's very helpful. I would like to ask one question from Barbara. She asked, Sean, what do you say to young people, teens through 20-somethings, who were in jail because they think that easy, fast money from drug sales is how they will make a living? What words work to help begin to change their minds? And I think you addressed that in part in your presentation, but it might be good to kind of revisit that. How might we be able to help our young folks?
Well,
sort of
initially,
prevention.
I learned over a couple of years of facilitating that you can't dictate to somebody that's young, 17-year-old. For some reason they don't accept that too much. So you gotta give them the numbers. Most time you give them the numbers. So they on a street corner, they make a couple $1,000s here and there, or they make a little more than that. But then they get arrested and they gotta do 5 years. So you're telling me those couple $1,000s that you made is worth the 5-10 years you just did, away from your family, your friends, your kids most times? Then you tell them, okay, you come to jail and you are the protector of your family, or one of the protectors of your family. Who are you protecting now behind this jail cell? Not only are you not protecting anyone, you're sitting in a cell and you're putting that undue pressure of the same person you claim to want to protect. You have to drive many miles, like Valerie said, to come visit you. You have her spending gas money. You have her buying you food on a visit. You have her buying your kids stuff because you can't do it yourself. Or you have her put money on your books when you need, because nobody else is there to do it, because they're only paying you 92 cents a day. Then you got to go to the point of saying, all right, sometime at some point, you got to get tired of this. Or somebody telling you when you got to go to sleep, telling you when you got to get up, telling you got to stand for count, feeding you food that you wouldn't feed a billy goat. Yeah, because everything is about money. So you got to go at them about money and about common sense, because they do have common sense. Best believe, if they're sitting on that street corner selling these drugs or robbing, they got common sense, but they feel they got to do it to get that fast money to take care of their family. Because I'm telling you, 99% of the time, their excuse is, I got to take care of my family. But you tell them, okay, that's like I said, honorable. Take care of your family. Who take care of your family when you're gone? So you can't have both ways. You can't say I'm gonna take care of my family and then leave them out there alone for 5-10 years because you made $1,000, $10,000, or $20,000 to put food on the table. Because now that means nothing. Because that little $20,000 you just made, you could have made at McDonald's. I best believe you can make it at McDonald's in a year. While you may not like it, but you're safe. You're at home. So you can't have both ways. At least that was one of my answers to their questions, and when I used to facilitate the young kids that come around. Because believe me, those jails are full of 21-year-olds, 18-year-olds that are doing, how you say, 50 years, and they run around the jail like it's a day camp because they feel they have no hope, that they're nothing to lose no more, which is a lot to lose. Because you don't know what happens the next day. You don't never know what happens that next month, because people are getting out of jail. They're not doing that 50 years they were initially sentenced to. They're not doing that life sentence they initially sentenced to. They're given an opportunity. So you give that opportunity, what are you going to do with it? So why not start now? So that the groups that we had, like AVP, Alternative Violence Project, we gave them options. We taught them skills to, how you say, meet different types of situations. Just like Linda was saying, while we have restorative justice, it's a little different to kind of, like, we call it a circle up. It's a little different than what usual, and which I just found that out because I asked a question to them about meeting victims and offenders meeting each other and stuff like that, and they said we don't do that. So I kind of just found out about that. But and same thing, like, once you able in your brain to take accountability and responsibility for your actions, that sets you up to do many different other things, because you already know, okay, I made a choice. I'm not defined by my choice, but I'm taking accountability for my actions. Now I'm trying to do better. Then once you get them to actually say that, best believe you got them now. Now you have them. But until they're able to take accountability and responsibility, you don't really have them just yet, because they're 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and you can't live like that. And they're just learning that. Again, and you can't say it's because they're young. That's the way it is. That's an excuse, because we learn at a young age to make choices. Just like we touch a hot stove, it burns us. You're gonna stop touching that hot stove, ain't you? I don't care how old you are. It was hot. So you're gonna continue to be and do good if you want to do good. You got to be proactive in your own life.
Good answer.
Okay, we've got another question for you, Wasim, from Khadija. What do you think we as a community can do to help people on life without parole while they are incarcerated? What can we do to help them? And do you know of any organizations that can help people visit family while they're incarcerated?
Yes, I believe there's a few different organizations that help. I don't know how it's going through COVID, but different organizations like I said, like Circle Up does it, AVP does it, and I'm just started one called ACL, not ACLU, but it's something in that realm. I gotta look it up again. But we are trying to fight solitary confinement. We're trying to fight bail. How do they get ransoms instead of actual bail, people to get out of jail, and we're trying to fight life being life on death. Life being life in jail, because in every other place, life is 25 years, and then you get the opportunity to come home. But in Pennsylvania, life is life. Even though a lot of people don't know is on the books, they got 25 years as life. But for some reason, somehow they continue to pull off that life is life once you get sentenced to life. That's why when you got juvenile lifers and you got different organizations that are now trying to shine light on what needs to be done, I think that us as a group right here, we can get together. I think Linda made it. Well, she was talking about a story about a guy buying buses and taking them over and using that same logical thing could be happening here, because buses go to prisons. And as I said, no matter what type of religion you are, you got people in prison. And when those people come home, they're coming to our community. So we as a people need to get together and ask the proper questions and come up with proper solutions. And we all can do that. And we can start small. We can start by just having an opportunity to you can find a list of names on a roster of a prison. It ain't about who they are. You know they got a life sentence, and we're people that want to help. Then you ask the question, what can I do to help you? And most times, not about money. It's about somebody write me an email to say hi. Send me a picture from the outside to say, this is what's going on out here. A picture of my family, which I haven't seen a picture of my family in 10 years. You can stop by there and say, my name is such such. I'm here to take pictures for such such, and just want to send it to him, so he can know what his family's doing good. Or have a place that, as you know, right now it's set up on videos. So have a proper place to say, you have a video with your family. I got a laptop. We're gonna set it up, because most people in that right now don't have laptops. They can't afford them. And the phones, if you don't got a proper phone, you're not doing it either. So how can you have a visit? This imagine being in jail and they say, well, we got Zoom visits now. I can't get a visit. I can't get no money because we can't work because of COVID. Now you're like your depression keeps going down and down and down because you feel the outside people don't care enough. But once you show them that we do, you could like picking names out of a hat. Hey, how you doing? My name is such and such, and I care. What can I do to help you? That's easy, simple. See, people try to make a big thing of what can we do? What can we do? Start small. Always start small. Okay, please believe it rolls downhill. That little snowball, it gets big at the end.
Yep. Big believer in the ripple effect.
Exactly.
You just do it something small and it makes a tremendous difference. I'd like to jump in with another question. I'd like to direct this one to Valerie. It's from Donna. As a retired special education teacher, do our speakers see a strong relationship between kids with learning disabilities and crime? And Valerie, you may have a sense for that because you were actually in teaching yourself.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Valerie?
I'm sorry.
Are you muted?
Yeah, I was muted.
Okay.
Yes, there is some problems when children are labeled, and some kids really don't need to be labeled. You have boys in your classroom, and boys, in my opinion, are going to roughhouse and play and have a lot of fun. Sometimes you need patience and say, okay, I'm going to give you a time to play around and have fun in the classroom. Right now is my time. So I split it up and I say my time first, and then I'll let you have time. And a lot of times, I think the child is labeled before the person has patience to deal with the child or learn how to deal with the child. A lot of children have to learn how to sit still. And if all of you remember, when we went to church when we were young, your mother would either pinched you or popped you, but no one saw it, but they got you good when you were sitting in church. So we were taught to sit. We were taught to read. We were taught to do a lot of things. And a lot of times these kids are from parents who are young and they don't know how to train the child. Ergo, you have a child that is going to act up in class. And I don't like to say the word act up. I just like to say that they don't have space to do the things that they want to do. So yes, a lot of times the kids will get put into special ed, and these are smart kids, because I'm gonna tell you, a lot of those dealers on the corner can do a lot of mental math real fast and get that money that they need to get and know how much you owe them. So they're not dumb people that are on the corner. Let's get that stood right there very fast. They are not. But they get into circumstances and box them in. And I'll give you an example. I tried to get one kid to get his driver's license and he wouldn't get it. He was always on the corner and he was always buying a car and the police would take it because he had no license, no insurance, no registration. When he finally figured out that he needed to get it, he had a $5,000 bill before he could get his license. He went back on the street, apologized to me, got his license, paid the bill, and he said he learned a hard lesson. And sometimes they have to learn a little lesson that they'll listen to you. Because with some of the kids in my class, I would pay them to not be on the corner.
Mhm.
I paid them to not be on the corner. I had to reason with them, and it worked for some, not all of them, for some. So you do what you can do to, because I figured out, as Sean was talking about money, I tried to figure with them that if I gave you a little bit of money, this might work, and it's cheaper than you going to prison and then paying for a lawyer. So my way might be cheaper, but if they feel that you care, sometimes they listen to your reasoning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Um, and I feel strongly that if a child does have a specific learning disability, more money needs to be placed and counseling needs to be focused on that child so that his needs are met. And then
Mhm.
he does not go on to become disruptive and, have other problems in the future and possibly end up in jail. So I
Yeah.
just feel like if you're either going to pay for it now when the child's young, or you're going to end up paying it tenfold when he's much older and in jail.
But a lot of people don't reason that way, and they don't
Mm.
have the patience. And see, to
Mhm.
me, looking back, I think it's patience. And
Mhm.
I'm not going to say that I'm the perfect person, but some of my background, my parents were foster parents. So they took care of a lot of children that nobody wanted. So I saw what a mother and father can do as teamwork. And even though my parents were, I'm going to say they weren't the perfect parents, but they teamed up,
Mhm.
work with the kids. And a lot of times when you see parents working together as a team, then the kids know they can't get around you and they'll work with you. So, a lot of times you need a tag team. And I don't care what anybody says, you need a tag
Mm.
team to deal with young people.
Marilyn, can I add something to that? I ran a support group for 12 years and this was many, many years ago, over 25 years ago, for children and adults with attention deficit disorder. When we did part of our advocacy, we worked with the prison systems and this was before restorative justice really became a quote unquote thinkable solution in places to do more prevention work. Um, I'm fortunate because I live in a county who saw the systems that weren't working and were willing to think outside the box long before many other places have, to bring in restorative justice programs and youth aid panels and other programs. And even our local police department tries as hard as they can without breaking the law to not put people in the law and work with the community. But we saw that a lot. We addressed the not only learning disabilities, but many, many other health issues.
Okay. I would like to throw in two relatively quick questions and then get to a little bit longer one. Lamont wanted to know from Sean, how did you get introduced to Islam? Because it's clear from your story that your faith made a big difference to you. And I think we can all relate to that, how important one's faith would be, one's spiritual life would be in helping get their life sort of going the way they need to do that. But we're just wondering, did someone come in and share that with you?
Nobody came in and shared it with me. It was a guy that was on death row with me, who's now
Okay.
off with life sentence. It was 1998 when he introduced me to Islam, and of course, a lot of people say guys come to jail, they gravitate to Islam, they just want to be Muslim to be with the group. Well, in isolation and toxic confinement, you can't be with a group. So he allowed me to read up on some things, and I believe what I was reading. I mean, it was good, and to this forward, like 22 years later, I'm still Muslim. I'm still praying 5 times a day. I'm still fast Ramadan, which is next month. And like I said, I'm scared not to. You know what I'm saying? My faith is strong enough that it gave me a second opportunity at life, and
Yeah.
I'm blessed. And anybody that says they don't believe in God is I'm living proof. Like, I came from death row to be at home with my family, working at the courthouse. Who'd have thought some death row inmate could be working at the courthouse? So
Thank you.
Amen,
Thank
brother.
you.
it's,
Thank
it's,
you for
it's a
sharing
thing.
that. Yeah. Okay, one other quick question is, what can the state do to give ID to parolees? That is just bizarre.
Well, actually, it's policy. The council's supposed to call you when they know you're about to go home. At least you know you're about to go home 4 months before you actually go home. You get paroled, you're 4 months ahead of your parole date, and the council's supposed to call you in. You sign up because the PennDOT is connected to the prison, so you do everything at the prison. You get your picture taken, it goes right to PennDOT and everything. So I'm not understanding how all these people are going home without no proper ID. And that's the thing that needs to be brought up to Wetzel. And that needs to be brought up to Attorney General. Like I was telling Marilyn earlier, I had a forum with the Attorney General's office, and he was asking the question, what can we do? I said, well, the first thing we do is make sure they got proper ID when they come home. Proper ID, social security card, birth certificate, everything they need, because all that comes to the prison. There's no excuse. Again, the counselor helps that. Now, if we start a thing that we talk to people that are in prison and we ask them the question, do you have proper ID? You about to come home, do you have proper ID? Well, let's get that started. Who can I call? Because one thing that prison don't like is when their family and friends call Harrisburg to say, why is not this going on?
Mm.
They do not like that. And then what their first instinct to do is make sure it gets done. That's nothing is the tree of connection and support. Support is a lot of things. So let's say always right here, right now, for one guy, call Wetzel and say, excuse me, sir, he been put in a hole and we want to know why. Or, excuse me, sir, he's supposed to come home 4 months. He has no ID. He has no birth certificate. He has no social security card. And he talked to the council, and the council not doing his job. What can we do? I bet you believe by the time you hang up that phone, he'd have made 20 calls to that jail and asking the same question, what's going on? And that counselor is mad, but he's going right to that inmate's cell. I need to see you when they let you out. We need to get your ID. Even though he's been telling him for the past 3 months, I need an ID. But when that higher up comes to him, and that's showing the jail, that's showing everybody that person's not alone. He's not doing this alone. And once they find out you're not alone, they move.
That's true.
They definitely move. They do not like that outside people getting involved in their business.
That's true.
So once you get involved in their business, they do right.
That's good to know. Let me throw out one more question and then I'll get to a bigger one. Why does the system resist restorative justice programs? Either you, Sean, or Linda may be able to speak to that.
Well, remember I told you earlier, jail is big business.
Mm-hmm.
So why fix the problem if you're gonna mess with our money? Because remember, I don't think up near Pittsburgh area, they were talking about closing down the jail.
Mhm.
That whole community went into uproar.
Mhm.
Not because they, oh, we need jails for protection, we need jails for, safety. No. Why are you taking our jobs?
Mhm.
Do you believe you got human beings in a prison cell? They're not animals. They're not. And you talking about why are you taking our jobs? Why we got a prison why we got so many prisons? Why are you so quickly to put money into prison before you put money into a school?
Mhm.
Before you pay a teacher? A guard last year made $150,000 due to overtime and pay.
Yep.
How much do teachers get paid? Did any of you I don't know if there's teachers on this panel right now, but did any of you see $150,000 last year?
I will say no.
It's big business and it's about making money. It's not about safety. It's not about family of the victims. They don't care. I'm sure you tell you they do not care, because if there's another way to make money by letting they say we'll get $50,000 for each person they let out of jail. You know how fast these jails be cleaned out? It's sad, but it's the truth. And you find all that out, like being in the prison and seeing it is different than being outside and hearing about it. Like they don't care. And that's why you'll never see. They do it because, again, the outside are in a business and you make a whole lot of noise. They don't want that. So they're not going to completely stop us from coming in there. But they'll try to minimize. Like right now, I'm glad we talked about this. Right about now, they're trying to keep all our programs, Let's Circle Up, Restorative Justice, Ministries, on Zoom. They don't want us to come back in there. They want to keep us out. And we must all get together and say no. We need to go in, and once time is presentable for us, COVID, whatever, get back in there. We need to get back in there, because it's the presence that's the big thing. Not over Zoom. We can do Zoom. It's fine and dandy and everything, but sitting in front of somebody's face and have a conversation, and they can see your facial expression and see how you are and care, that what helps.
I can address the question from our county's perspective.
Okay, we have 3 minutes, so
I can do it real fast.
Okay.
It goes back to the guilt, the shame, and punishment. A lot of people in the system do not believe that people should be given, and a lot of people that think that people go through restorative justice programs, that it's easy. It's not easy, because you are facing people that you have harmed, and sometimes it's easier just to have to deal with that. That was one of the reasons our county was able to continue their programs, because of the record keeping and showing the people in the county the dollars that were being saved that could be put into mental health programs, couldn't be put into education programs. And that's why the programs have continued the length of time they have in our county.
Okay, one last question I want to throw out, and I'll just try to address it really quickly. This is from Heidi. How can someone get started with this ministry? What resources are available for training? What advice would you give to someone interested in starting a ministry in their church where the members might be hesitant or afraid? Wow, that's a great question. And what I can say is there's our motto for our team is everybody can do something, okay? But not everybody has to do the same thing. And if you look back, and I will be sending out the PowerPoint to all of the attendees, so you'll be able to see that one slide with all the different ways we can help, whether it's getting involved in prevention, ministering to people inside, ministering to the families of those people who are incarcerated, ministering to victims, to the correctional facility staff, getting involved in restorative justice programming, reentry, helping people when they come out, education or advocacy, even if it's just having an educational program for your congregation to help enlighten them as to the scope of the problem and some of the different ways you might be able to inspire people within your congregation to want to get involved in some way, and then go with that, see what they feel called to do. Run a book group. There are a lot of books out there on these topics, and just have a discussion about that to get a lot of people will read a book or watch a film and discuss that, as opposed to maybe just going to a lecture or something. So, there's lots of different ways you can do that. And
come to Healing Community.
Come to Healing Communities training. We'll be offering it again in the fall is our plan. A lot of opportunities for education. I've been at this 11 years. I was telling somebody this morning, it's just, I know so little of the whole problem, even though I've been working at it for years, because it's such a big, complex system. There's so many different aspects. So there's always more to learn. And the key is going to be finding out where people in your congregation feel called to help. And people will be called in different ways. You just have to identify what they are feeling moved to do. And again, I will be passing out or sending out that PowerPoint presentation. Someone else asked for the address for that little 4-minute video. I'll be including that in an email as well. And I will also be attaching a handout I have with some resources on prison ministry and restorative justice, books, films, websites, that you can look over and see what calls to you, what you might be able to start with.
Marilyn,
go ahead.
People just even starting to have conversations. There are a lot of families in your churches that you don't even know that they have people incarcerated or were incarcerated. You may have neighbors, whatever. Just even having that conversation, not to excuse people, to hold people accountable, but to show what we're supposed to be doing. And we're not doing, and people are afraid to step up because they're afraid of what you're going to do with the information you give them.
And even just talking about the concept of prison ministry gets the conversation going sometimes. I got started in this because someone talked about what they had gotten involved, and I thought it might be safe to ask them about it. because I was afraid to ask people about it because I thought they'd think I was weird wanting to know about that, right? And so just having the conversation, people will come out of the woodwork frequently and want to know more and want to get involved. You just need to start the conversation. And I'd encourage everyone to do that. Now today, each of our speakers could have talked for the whole time on their own particular area. And these are just some areas of the problem. There's lots of different aspects that we haven't even been able to cover. But hopefully this workshop has given you at least a flavor of how the criminal justice system works, or maybe doesn't so often, and some of the ways you might be able to help. Remember that whole list of approaches to helping, and see what you are being called to do. See what speaks to you and look into getting involved, or at least learning more about that. And please do not hesitate to contact our team or myself if you have any questions. I'll include the email in the email I send out, so you can email us. And I'd really encourage anyone to communicate with us. We want to keep the conversation going. We want to help keeping you resourced and support you in moving along in these endeavors. We're at 10:32, so we're 2 minutes over our time. I just want to say thank you again for everyone for attending this workshop. Appreciate your being here. I'm going to go ahead and sign off now because I know you need a little bit of a break before you go to your next session's workshop. And thanks again to each of our speakers for their willingness to share this morning. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Peace. Have a wonderful day.
Yep, take care.
Thank you.